Stories that matter. The journey of life from birth to death is an extraordinary trip, sometimes filled with great joy and excitement, but at other times filled with pain, sorrow, and disappointment. Stories That Matter shares both extremes with you. Sometimes our stories will make you feel very happy, but the journey of life is not all happiness. Other times, the journey of life will make you feel sad, for all of us have experienced both extremes. Stories That Matter will begin right after the break with a story that will touch your heart in the journey of life.
Welcome to Stories That Matter. I am your host, Doug Thompson. My special guest today is Tiffany Gravett. Right?
Gravett.
Say it again.
Gravett. It's French.
Okay, I never would have got it.
Fancy gravy.
Well, hey, listen, that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. And you're in Branson, and you are a writer for the Branson Globe. True?
Yes.
How in the world did you ever get into that position?
I felt like it was a God thing. I had been working at a nursing home for about 4 months, and they shut down the nursing home in Crane. And I thought that was going to be the job I retired from. And 4 months later, I'm without a job. And my good friend, Cindy Thomas, who also writes for the paper, writes the reflections column. She heard about the loss of my job and called me and said, I think you might be a good fit for the Branson Globe. And so she referred me to Rob, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and Rob would be Rob Doherty, is the publisher for the Branson Globe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Have you written articles before?
No, I haven't.
Well, I got to tell you, Tiffany, when I first, and of course we take the Globe, we subscribe to it because Rob's a friend of ours, and I love the paper. And when I got it and started reading some of your articles, I said, man, these are just fantastic articles. And most times when I see fantastic articles that are faith-based articles, that tells me that somebody's been through some things in their life that's caused some experiences for them that helps them to be able to share really well-written articles. And as I told you before we went on the air here, why I've written a number of faith-based articles for our local newspaper. And so like you and I were talking about, I can tell which ones are inspired by the Lord because they just roll. And those that I'm struggling to come up with, they're done by me, and that's the way they sound. And so I'm sure you have that same sort of experience.
I do, yeah. Yes.
And so you wrote something called Landmarks. Tell me what that is.
It's a book. I've got one right here just to show you what it looks like. It came about in a really dark season of my life. I was going through a divorce about 5 years ago. And I think if you could say someone hit rock bottom, that was where I was at that point. And I was in my apartment one day. I was laying on the couch saying, woe is me, throwing a pity party. And I had seen God work in my life from the time I was little, but at this point I felt like God wasn't there. And so I just threw out one last desperate prayer to God and said, God, where are you? And immediately I could see my whole life spread out in front of my face. Like I compare it to like when a dad gets his wallet out and all these pictures come out of his kids and he's so proud of every single moment. That's how I felt in that moment, that God was just pulling out all these pictures of me and saying, you're my girl. I'm so proud of you. And even in the hard times, he was there. And so after I saw all of that, he said, I'm right here. And I realized that he was there in the dark season just as much as he had been there the rest of my life. And so Landmarks, the title came about because I started thinking about the Israelites and how they had specific landmarks that throughout their journey, they would, when specific things would happen, good or bad, they would build an altar and worship God there, and then they would give it a name. And so I started seeing how seasons in my life kind of had a name for me too. So one of them was the wilderness. One of them was Turnback Creek. One of the book ends in the palace. But it's just different seasons of my life where I saw God work. I saw him do miracles, and brought me to where I am today.
And if some of the listeners wanted to, or the viewers wanted to take a look and get a hold of Landmarks, how do they do so?
Well, I have a website. It's called landmarksministry.com. It's all one word. And they could purchase the physical copy there. And then the ebook version is available on Barnes & Noble and Apple Books and Smashwords.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Stories That Matter. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. And Tiffany, we were just visiting a little bit about some of the things you were saying in the first episode about, I was just really having a tough time. Things were really just going south on me, and I was just feeling like I'd been abandoned by the Lord. Of course, you knew that you hadn't, but it felt that way at some times in your life.
Yeah. And it, at that point in my life, it was so different from the fairy tale dream I had as a little girl. I loved the Lord from the time I was very little. I was raised in a Christian home, raised in church, and of course had all these dreams of what my life would be like when I grew up. I would marry the man of my dreams, and I would have kids, and I wanted to be in ministry. And so through the years, I got married at 18, right from mom and dad to being married. And a couple of years later, had my first baby, and I've got 3 kids. And my husband at the time and we did homeschool with our kids. And I was a go-getter. I wanted the world to see what a superwoman I was. And so that was, I did everything I could to look like this wonderful, upstanding woman of God, and doing ministry, and my kids just being the model children that everybody could see and be proud of. And then I just suddenly found everything crumbling. All those dreams that I had started falling apart.
Was it devastating to you?
It was probably one of the most devastating times in my life. And it was like I was immediately on my own for the first time in my life. Because like I said, I was 18 when I got married. I had never experienced life on my own before. And so suddenly I find myself with no money. I've got my 3 kids with me. I trying to support us on $8 an hour. And it was very difficult, a very difficult time in my life.
Yeah, I can tell I can tell by the stress that as you go back over some of that.
Yeah.
Where were you, where'd you grow up at?
I grew up in Crane, Missouri.
How close is that to where you are now in Branson?
It's not too far away. It's about a 45-minute drive from Branson.
Okay, and your parents, are they still with you?
They moved to Hot Springs, Arkansas when I was pregnant with my first baby, and they've worked at a children's home there for about 20 years now.
Excellent. And you've got 3 kids? I
do. Allie, Hannah, and Jonah. They are 19, 17, and 14.
Okay. And the 19-year-old still at home with you?
She's not. No, she is actually in a program in Kansas City right now. That she's had some difficult times along the way too, I actually talk about her in my book a little too, about some things that she dealt with. And so she's had a rough time of it, but she's trying to make good choices for herself now.
Good, good. And the youngest would be what is that? A freshman, maybe sophomore, freshman?
Yeah, he's a freshman
In Branson.
Actually, I do write for the Branson Globe, but I live in Aurora. Yes. So he just started at Aurora High School this year. So he's doing well so far. He enjoys it.
Good, good. And you're writing an article every week for the Globe?
Yes.
And what else do you do for the Globe?
That's actually all I do. Like you, I just enjoy writing God-centered articles. I'm not much of a reporter. That's not really in my comfort zone. I've thought about branching out and doing that some, but usually it's just the things that I feel God putting on my heart. And that's what I write.
Okay. And do you sometimes write 3-4 articles in a week and then you've got them covered for a while, or are you every week's a new week?
Every week's a new week. I'm kind of one of those people that I do things at the last minute, but sometimes the inspiration doesn't come until the last minute. Also, I don't know why I didn't mention this. I do have just a small thing where I gather up quotes from kids, from people that I know, or my own kids. Even as teenagers, they still say some cute things. And so that article, that's called Out of the Mouths of Babes. So I don't really write it. It's just quotes from kids. And it definitely will make your day when you read it. There's some funny things in there, some heartwarming things that kids.
Is that available on your website?
No, that's in the Branson Globe normally. I don't always get that out every week. It depends on how many people send me quotes, but that's definitely something to look for because it's a lot of fun.
And do you get a fair amount of feedback from the readers?
Usually that will come through Rob, because people will contact Rob and then he'll forward those things. And I have gotten a few people that said they enjoyed my articles. In fact, there was a couple from, I believe, Illinois that came and visited Branson just on a vacation, and they read the Globe and saw one of my articles, and it was about my book, and they contacted me, got on my website and bought my book, and then they ended up buying my book for several other people that they knew, and it was just a really neat connection. And they even sometimes will come and visit me whenever they come back to the Branson area. So really? That's a really neat connection that I was able to make through the Globe.
Do you get to Branson frequently?
Yes, my parents actually own a retirement home there, so they plan on retiring later this year, but that's kind of the family gathering place. Whenever they come to visit Missouri, all of the family goes there. And so, yeah, we're in Branson quite a bit.
Right. Well, excellent. We're going to cut away, take a little break. You're listening to Stories That Matter. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. Tiffany, we were talking right before we went away to break about some of the motivation. How do you get the motivation for the articles? Because you and I both do some of the same things with writing faith-based articles. And like we were talking before we went on the air with it, that the big difference is when the Lord motivates you for that, it just flows. And if not, get all done with it, and boy, this is really bad, or average anyway. And so, do you rely upon those experiences that you've had?
I do. I rely on those a lot, and just the experiences of other people around me. Just this past week, this week, the article that I wrote about was about my brother Tyler and his wife Chastity, and how they had prayed for a baby for 5 years, and the Lord worked a miracle in their life. And so I love to tell stories, real stories. because people don't want to hear flowery words and people who act like they've got it all together. And that's one thing about the way I write. I'm just kind of raw and open, and I speak the truth about things that I've gone through. And it's the same with my book too. I've gone through, I've struggled with mental illness throughout my life. And just, there's people out there who are struggling with those things, who feel a sense of guilt over it, or they feel isolated because they feel like other people don't understand what they're going through. And I just want people to know that there's hope in Jesus, no matter what they go through. And even when they feel like they're not worth anything, God sees their worth, and he thinks they're worth it. And so I feel like people just need a real story.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that's true, and they appreciate it. And one of the things that I speak in my own situation, my dad got killed when I was very young, and so my mom made sure that we got into church on a regular basis. But I was just one of those just sort of sat there, and can't say that I got anything out of it because I wasn't interested in it. And at a later time in my life, then I went to the Lord to build that relationship, and it was entirely different then. I was interested, I was excited about it. Can't imagine going through life without the Lord. What's your history in this?
Well, like I said, I've always been in church, and I believe I did give my heart to the Lord at a very young age, but life has a way of humbling you and giving you a new perspective on things. And that's why I like to share some things that I don't really like to share. I share them because God told me to. And just like with my book, when he told me to write it, he said, I want you to be vulnerable. I want you to share things that you wouldn't normally want to share with people, because there are people out there who are going through what you've been through, and they need to know that there is hope. And so I do go into some detail about some of my struggles with mental illness and some mistakes that I made along the way in ministry and in my marriage. And when God told me to write the book, I said no. I said I don't want to share these things with the world. And but sometimes when God calls you to do something, it's almost like Chinese water torture. You can't get away from it, and it just keeps dripping and keeps dripping until you do it. And that's how it was with this. Like, I didn't feel worthy, I didn't feel qualified, and God said, you don't have to be qualified in yourself. And the way he revealed it to me, it was kind of out of order, and he would reveal like one of those landmarks in my life. For instance, one of the landmarks that I name in there is the bull rushes. And God just kept bringing a word to my mind, the word safety, safety, safety. And I would just sit down and I would start writing, and I would pray that the Holy Spirit would give me the words to say. And then the way the Holy Spirit would bring it together was beyond what I could have done in myself, just like you said. And it's sometimes I say the book was just written for me because of the things that God revealed to me through the writing of it. Because as I would write the story, it did bring me back to moments in my life that I had tucked away, that I didn't want to remember anymore. And we all have moments like that we don't want to think about. But as I would write about those things, I would weep, and it would bring those things back to my heart. But then I'd begin to see where I had come from that time and how far I had come through the grace of God. And what he had taught me through all of those things. And it makes you realize that even in those times of pain and hurt and heartache that you would never want to relive again, you also wouldn't go back and change it, because you see how God used every single thing, every heartache, every tear, for his glory and to make you into the person that he intended you to be.
And you know, too, from your writing and exactly what you've just said and what you went through, is that by going back through this, it helped me to recover from what I went through. It also gave me the ability to share in a rational manner with others so that they maybe haven't been through it yet and they're trying not to go through it, just like you were. I don't want to go through it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to do these things. Right. But instead, as you go through it, it's healing to you. Am I correct with that?
Yes. And at one time in my life, I definitely wouldn't have shared any of the things that I shared in my book, because, like I said, I wanted everybody to think I was this super holy woman of God. And it was during those times when I kept, I compare it to spinning plates, those like at the Chinese circus or whatever, how they start spinning plates and they just keep adding one plate after another until they've got so many plates spinning that you're like, they're going to drop it, and that's kind of the point that I got when I was trying to do all these things. I loved the Lord with all my heart, but there was a certain part of me that felt like the world needed to see this picture of perfection to be able to come to God, that maybe I would lose my witness if they saw the weaknesses in my life. But I got to a point where I couldn't add any more plates and they came crashing down. And it was at that moment that I realized that I needed the grace of God just as much as everybody else did. Even when I thought I was, working up an applause, I needed God's grace just as much as anybody else. And when I fell to rock bottom, it was that moment that God said, when you were acting perfect and doing all these wonderful things for me, I didn't love you any more than I already did. And now that you're in this pit, I don't love you any less. And that was a moment in my 30s, after I'd been in church my whole life. That was a moment where I truly experienced the grace of God.
I can understand. We're going to cut away, take a final break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. And Tiffany, one of the things that's obvious is that you're a gifted speaker, you're a gifted writer. And are you available for speaking engagements?
Yes, I am. My husband and I both. My husband actually was in ministry for over 20 years. And so we both are available to speak in churches or wherever. I've spoken in recovery meetings before. Just whoever needs to hear a real story about real life.
Well, that's awesome. And the contact information that we'll be putting up on screen that you gave me earlier, that's how they would be able to contact you?
Yes, and my husband also has a ministry that we actually do together. It's called Faith to Walk Ministries. And so people can contact us through there too. We have an email, faithtowalkministries@gmail.com. And then we have a website, www.faithtowalkministries.com.
Very good. We'll put it up on the program, and this program will go on the ALG Gospel Network, and it'll be on fairly soon. Tiffany, thank you so much for taking time to visit with.
Thank you.